News are listening to Regal 91.1, Auburn, Alabama.
Welcome in. It's the Fast Break on WEGL 91.1 FM. I'm JJ Jackson, and I'm joined every single week by Chris Williams and Ryan Lavoie. We bring you all the latest news and happenings in the basketball world, both collegiately and at the professional level. The past 2 weeks, we've been previewing 6 teams each week, giving you kind of our power rankings of the teams going into this upcoming NBA season, looking at their paper rosters and what we feel like will be the best teams. We're going to continue that this week. We have 6 new teams for you today, and we're going to start off with the Dallas Mavericks. This is a team that went 50-32 last season. They finished 7th in the Western Conference, and they lost in that first round series to the Houston Rockets, who then went on to compete in the Western Conference Finals. Rick Carlisle is entering his 8th season as head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, and he has got a brand new team this season. They lost a lot of pieces, guys, and I think my biggest area of concern going in, like a burning question type format for this show for the Mavericks would be, who's going to step up off that bench for this team, because this is a team that lost great bench players when you talk about Al-Farouq Aminu, Amari Stoudemire, and Richard Jefferson, who came in.
Yeah, with the Mavericks, I really feel like they're a more advanced version of the Los Angeles Lakers. They've continued to, they will not rebuild. They continue to try and shoot for the postseason. They're trying to build still around aging superstar Dirk Nowitzki, and I feel like until he retires from the league, they're going to keep trying to make the playoffs at whatever cost, and it's damaging their long-term prospects. I think that's most evident with them bringing in Darren Williams, because, Darren Williams is, he used to be 4 or 5 years ago one of the premier point guards in the league. Injuries and age have slowed him up the last couple of years when he played for Brooklyn, and so now we think that Darren Williams is still a good point guard in this league, but he's not really enough to catapult the team, to lead a team, and so Dallas, at best might be able to contend for the 8th spot in the West, but otherwise they're looking at a 9th or 10th place finish, and then that's not going to get them really a high enough draft pick to get a significant piece for the future. And they're just going to be left with another tough year next year. So I really think that Dallas is just a little bit better version of the Lakers in that they really shouldn't be shooting for the postseason, but they're trying to get Dirk in the postseason.
Yeah, this Mavericks team is interesting to me. I think you hit it on the head, Ryan, when you talked about Darren Williams. This is a guy who, before he went to Brooklyn, Dallas was the team that was really pursuing him. That was, if you'll remember, this is when Mark Cuban wanted Dallas to bring in Dwight Howard and Darren Williams, and they wanted to create this team that was going to be a contender for years to come in the West. And Dwight Howard ends up picking the Lakers, and then Darren Williams goes to the Nets, and Dirk's left in Dallas by himself. And this is, of course, after Dallas won the championship in 2011 when they beat the Heat. But now this team loses Monte Ellis, Tyson Chandler. You have Chandler Parsons, who you kind of stole away from Houston last year, but Chandler Parsons, the other Chandler, this guy has a player option at the end of this year, and Chandler Parsons can leave as soon as this season's over with if he wants to. And so if things are going south, Chandler Parsons could be moved this year. This is just a team that they have the talent. Dirk is one of the best players that's ever played in the NBA. But as far as the power ranking goes, this is a team that still sits low for me because I just don't know how much I can trust them. Once the season gets going, I don't think they have just raw talent to carry them a long way.
And a lot of that just has to do with the fact, a lot of the DeAndre Jordan saga that happened this summer, and once DeAndre decided to stay with the Clippers, him trying to. Mark Cuban and that Mavericks general management staff trying to put together a team for this upcoming season. And that's such an interesting point you hit on there, Chris. If Chandler Parsons decides to opt out of that contract, and then you add in the fact that, maybe this is Dirk's last year, who knows, you just lost 2 of your 2 best players, and now you're going to have to start over from scratch. For me, another big question is, can this team stay healthy enough to be a playoff team? When you talk about Chandler Parsons and Wesley Matthews, who they got from Portland this offseason, they both are probably not even going to be ready for that first game of the season. Devin Harris is a guy that's injury prone. He's going to play a lot of minutes for you. JJ Barea has been pretty healthy. He's been gotten banged up the past couple of seasons. So if they can stay healthy, I think that they can, the starting unit is going to have a lot of minutes, but, the Mavericks would like to keep Dirk off the floor. It's just, one way versus the other. I don't know how the season is going to go for them.
Yeah, and with Dallas, we would talk about Chandler Parsons. We got to remember he didn't have that good of a year last year. His percentages were down a little bit. He lost weight in the off season, and a lot of people think that's he gained, or did he gain the weight? He gained weight, and a lot of people think that affected his shooting motion. And so, if they can get a better year from him, we know Wesley Matthews is a very good shooter. Darren Williams certainly did play a lot better in the postseason. This team does have potential, but I just question, and I guess with DeAndre Jordan, if they had landed him, things would look different because you'd have a centerpiece for years to come, albeit he's not a dominant offensive player. But, this team, it could be okay this year, but it's not set up long term.
And when I'm looking at this projected depth chart and, who's going to get the minutes for this team, a guy that just popped up to me is Justin Anderson out of Virginia. I was very high on that draft pick, so maybe he can put together a good season so that if, Chandler Parsons decides to leave, Justin Anderson will step up and be ready to go next season.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team, again, in a competitive Western Conference. They're going to get beat up night in and night out. I don't see anybody on this team. Dirk is has been one of the greatest players, but he is getting older. Darren Williams, there's teams either had media days on Friday or they had media days today, and the Mavericks media day was today. And Rick Carlisle was saying during the media day today that Darren Williams still has a lot left in the tank. After he's come in, he seems to think that Darren Williams is motivated to play again, that maybe the Darren Williams we saw in Brooklyn was demotivated to play and to really give any effort. I know when I used to play like 2K and growing up watching Darren Williams on the Jazz back in the early mid-2000s, late 2000s, before he went to Brooklyn, Darren Williams was a really good point guard. There was a reason he was highly sought after when he went and signed with Brooklyn and got all that money that he did. It's because he was a good player. Had a lot of injury problems, but probably one of the better shooting point guards that was in the league in the late 2000s. So if he can turn it around, but I just don't know how much. Like Rick Carlisle said, Rick Carlisle thinks he has some stuff left in the tank, but I just don't know about that. This is a shaky team, but I never put anything past Mark Cuban because that guy could go out tomorrow and, he can find a way. He loves this team so much. He can go out and throw a lot of money at somebody, and that team will be turned around before you know it.
Yeah, and Chris, we're now going to move on to the next team in our power rankings, which is your Boston Celtics, and they really did not lose much this offseason. I mean, Brandon Bass, nice player, but certainly not anything to really be fretful about. But then they get a couple really good draft picks with R.J. Hunter and Terry Rozier and even Jordan Mickey, and then they're a big free agent acquisition of Amir Johnson. So
and bringing David Lee.
Yeah, and David Lee with the trade to Golden State, and got Gerald Wallace's cap space out of the way. So I got to throw it to Chris first, you being the Celtics fan. What do you think?
I appreciate the toss over to me, Ryan, because this is a team. So Friday I got to watch Celtics Media Day, and it was very exciting for me. First, I got to start off at Brad Stevens was the first guy they brought on at Media Day. Brad Stevens, this is now his third year in Boston. In his second year, led a team that had no business being in the playoffs, led them to a 7 seed in the East, albeit it is the East. But that man is a smart, very smart coach. So I have a lot of confidence in him as the coach. But like you said, Ryan, Amir Johnson and David Lee, big signings. I don't really know how it's going to work out because I feel like you want David Lee and Amir Johnson out on the floor at the same time. So, and there's just such a traffic jam here at the power forward position and center position. You have 7 people, and I don't know if Perry Jones is going to make the team or not, but you have 7 people right now on the roster between David Lee, Amir Johnson, Sullinger, who is in a contract year. I'm expecting big things from him this year. And Jordan Mickey, who you just drafted and gave a the biggest second-round guaranteed contract to any second-round draft pick ever. He signed a 3-year deal with the Celtics. Then you got Perry Jones, who they got in a trade from the Thunder this offseason. Then you still have Tyler Zeller, who played huge minutes last year and was really good for this team, and Kelly Olynyk, a first-round draft pick from a couple years ago. And so it's going to be interesting to see who gets the playing time. Does David Lee come off the bench? I think that would actually be a good thing to have David Lee come off the bench. And then the other thing that's going to be big for this Celtics team this summer, or not this summer, from this summer leading into the season, is not only, like you said, Ryan, you have R.J. Hunter and Terry Rozier. And actually, Rozier was the first of those two to be drafted. We always say R.J. Hunter first because he was a little bit more talked about coming into the draft. But Terry Rozier, highly talked about by Danny Ainge and his head coach, Brad Stevens. But James Young, everybody's buzzing around the Celtics organization right now about the Kentucky Wildcat that just turned, I think he's only just now 19. He might be 20 now. Still very young, but he has put in a lot of work. Everybody's really excited for him for year 2 of James Young. He only got to play here and there last season. And so, to me, the weak spot on this whole team is the small forward position. So that's just my outlook on the team. I think they're a good team. I think they're young, and they're in a good position to move forward. So as far as the power ranking goes, I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they're a good team, just not, I don't think they're ready to compete for a championship or anything.
Yeah, my biggest thing with the Boston Celtics, looking at this season and what they have ahead, they kept their pieces around, which is very important. You get a guy like Jay Crowder at the trade deadline with Dallas last season, you're able to keep him. When you look at, my one thing is scoring that I think I'm going to need to see, how exactly they shape that offense. Jeff Green led the team in scoring. He's no longer there. He's in Memphis. And then Isaiah Thomas played very well for them in the playoffs. Granted, they got swept by the Cavaliers, and none of the games were really close. And so I just think that they're going to need somebody to step up and score, because I don't think you want Isaiah Thomas being your point guard to lead you in scoring unless somebody else can step up, facilitating that offense. And then the second thing is, I see a lot of good pieces on this roster, but I don't see anybody that jumps out to me as great. So my thing is, who's going to step over? Who's going to be that leader and heart and soul of this team?
JJ, that's actually a great lead into what I was about to say, because when you think about Boston Celtics, you do think about a star player, whether it be Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Paul Pierce. But I will say with this team, there are young players at every position that are continuing to develop that could be really good and are already good NBA players. And I do think that, they've got so many of them. It would be hard to believe that at least a couple don't develop into really, really good, borderline all-star players. And so I think the future is really bright for Boston, just because when you have 2 or 3 youngsters at the same position, that'll make a greater incentive for those guys to work to get better, because they're having to beat out somebody. And so I think that the way they've got it, and with Brad Stevens being a guy from college that's used to developing young players, I think they've got their roster right where Brad Stevens would like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this roster, again, like you said, Ryan, young talent and young talent to push each other and drive each other to be better. This team is going to be young and raw. They're not going to win every game, but this is a building process. They kind of did a accelerated rebuild instead of breaking it, tearing it all the way to the ground. They traded away, some veterans in Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. They got a lot of draft picks. They don't have any draft, or they have I think they have their own first-round pick this year. But then in 2018, they have a whole nother load of draft picks coming in from the Brooklyn Nets still. So, this is still a team that's building for the future. And, if there's a star that shows any interest, then I know that Danny Ainge and the Celtics are going to be ready to flip, because I agree with you, JJ. This team doesn't have a star. There's not a name on here like, oh, wow, this guy's on the Celtics. We've got to watch this game. This is not a team that has anyone like that, but they know that, and they're building to get to that position.
Absolutely, yeah. That's my thing. Who's going to step up? Who's going to hit the big shots for you? Who's going to become a household name? Because when you think about the Celtics, you associate big names with them so much. That wraps up our first segment. We have to go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue breaking down season previews around the National Basketball Association. You're listening to the Fast Break, WEGL 91.1.